when the HOA security guy stood in front of my 20-ton tactical supply truck like he was Captain America with a name tag. I had two thoughts. One, this man's spine is made of pure delusion, and two, I hope he likes lawsuits. That's how the chaos started. It was 6:48 a.m., the sun barely up, the dew still fresh on the neighborhood sidewalks, and my lead driver Marcus was radioing in from the front gate. His voice crackled through the radio, laced with confusion and annoyance. Mike, we got a situation. Some dude in a reflective vest is standing in front of the truck waving his hands like he's about to summon an airstrike. I nearly choked on my coffee. I knew exactly who it was, the new HOA security guy, a guy named Derek. Of course, apparently, the HOA had voted to hire private neighborhood enforcers after a rash of mysterious garage door code leaks, real say stuff. Now they had clipboards, vests, walkie-talkies, and delusions of jurisdiction. I got in my truck and headed to the gate, already rehearsing my speech in my head. These weren't just any trucks being blocked. I run a logistics company that contracts with several federal agencies, including the National Guard. That morning's delivery was carrying encrypted communications gear, mobile water purifiers, and boxed rations scheduled for a statewide emergency drill. And it was all time sensitive. But HOA Direct didn't care. He stood planted in front of the lead vehicle, arms crossed like he was about to issue a parking ticket to an Abrams tank. I pulled up beside the truck and stepped out. Morning, I said, keeping my tone friendly. Derek glanced at me, then at his clipboard. These trucks aren't on the approved vehicle list, he declared. You'll need to turn around or get proper authorization from the HOA board. No exceptions. I stared at him, trying to decide if he was kidding. He wasn't. You do realize this is federal equipment, right? It's part of an authorized supply chain for the National Guard. We've been running this route every Thursday for 6 months. You're literally blocking a unit with a satellite relay in it. Direct didn't blink. Federal or not, if it doesn't have a residential delivery permit or an HOA clearance, it's not coming in. He then pointed at a laminated sheet hanging from a chain-link fence that read, "No oversized vehicles without prior notice. HOA Resolution 17.3 bits." At that point, Marcus leaned out of the truck window and whispered, "Should I just idle forward? He looks like he'd flinch." I held up a hand. "No, we're not running over HOA security. That's how you end up in a BuzzFeed headline." Instead, I pulled out my phone and called Karen. Yes, her real name was Karen. She was the HOA president, full of Botox and bad energy. Her voice came through the line like a screeching tea kettle. "Mr. Mitchell, if your drivers cannot follow our entry protocols, perhaps you should find alternate delivery zones. We can't have military-grade trucks intimidating the residents." I took a breath. "Karen, you're currently impeding federal logistical operations. Do you understand what that means legally?" She chuckled. "You can go around like everyone else, Mike. Maybe this will teach you not to be so entitled." Then she hung up. I turned to Derek, who was now taking pictures of the license plates with a disposable camera. "You're going to want to delete those," I said. "That plate is registered to a communications crate under protective classification." He smiled smugly. "I'll send them to the board. Let them decide." I looked at the chain he had wrapped around the gate post and padlocked shut. That was the moment I made a mental note. Today would be the last time anyone from that HOA blocked one of my trucks. I called Sergeant Patel, my contact with the National Guard. Within moments, her voice crackled on the line with military precision. "They did what?" she asked. "They chained the gate shut and blocked the truck." I repeated. "Driver stuck. We're on a deadline." She was silent for a beat, then said, "Understood. Stand by. We're escalating." While I waited, Derek got even bolder. He walked over to the second truck, tapped on the window and said, "You're not authorized to be here. I could report you to Homeland Security for impersonating military transport." The driver, a real Army Reserve named Tommy, raised his eyebrow and replied, "You think I'm impersonating myself?" "Son, I've served longer than you've had chest hair." Derek turned red but strutted back to his post like he just won a round. 10 minutes later, The sound of approaching engines made Derek freeze. A matte black SUV rolled up, windows tinted, government plates gleaming. Out stepped two men in suits with earpieces, clearly not HOA members. One approached Derek, flashed a badge, and said, "Sir, you're currently interfering with a federally sanctioned delivery. Unlock the gate now, or you will be detained under Section 138 of Title 18. Derek looked like someone had yanked his batteries out. "Wait, are you guys real? This isn't like neighborhood cosplay." The agent didn't answer. Derek slowly fumbled for the keys and unlocked the gate with trembling hands. As the convoy rolled through, I caught Karen standing in her front window with binoculars and a shocked expression that could curdle milk. I gave her a polite wave. She shut the curtains like I just flashed a lawsuit at her. I got back in my truck, adrenaline fading, and turned to Marcus. "So what do we do now?" he asked. I smiled. "Now we let them dig their hole deeper. We're going to give the HOA the full education on what happens when you pick a fight with the federal supply chain." Later that day, a formal notice was served to the HOA's legal contact. Locking a federal delivery was no joke. It triggered automatic investigation protocols. Karen tried to say it was all a misunderstanding, but the photos, gate chains, and Derek's little security show were all documented. Marcus uploaded a video of the whole incident to Reddit under Entitled People with the caption, "HOA guy tries to block National Guard, gets owned by feds." It hit 800,000 views in 6 hours. But that was just the beginning, because they hadn't just blocked a truck, they triggered a chain reaction that would bring their little kingdom of HOA nonsense to its knees. And the next delivery, that one would come with something no HOA rulebook could stop: military-grade backup. By the next morning, the entire neighborhood was buzzing like a kicked hornet's nest. Cars were slowing down to stare at the now infamous front gate where Derek had chained it shut and nearly caused a federal incident. Someone had already placed a hand-painted sign near the sidewalk that read "Military Zone. Do not poke." It wasn't wrong. Inside the HOA boardroom, also known as the rec center gym with folding chairs, Karen was doing her best to save face. She held an emergency HOA meeting that, ironically, wasn't authorized by the bylaws, but that didn't stop her. With her signature high ponytail, clipboard, and rhinestone pen, she called the meeting to order. "We are under attack," she said dramatically, "and not just by trucks. We are under attack by narrative. Social media is spinning this situation. I have received emails from news reporters. One of them asked if we declared war on the military. Meanwhile, I was at my warehouse, calmly sipping coffee while fielding 3 different calls, one from my lawyer, one from a Department of Defense logistics officer, and one from a local news station wanting an exclusive interview. I declined the interview. I had no interest in turning this into a media circus, but the HOA's behavior had already blown it wide open. I did, however, send them the unedited footage from Marcus's dash cam, complete with timestamps, Derek's face in glorious 1080p, and the federal agents walking him back toward the gate like he was a kid who peed in the pool. My lawyer was already working on a formal complaint, and the National Guard had scheduled a site visit to assess continued cooperation with local jurisdictions, which was military speak for "make sure no one pulls this garbage again." Back in the neighborhood, Karen had decided the best way to regain control was surveillance. Within 24 hours, 3 new security cameras were mounted near the entrance. The HOA paid a local contractor who clearly had no idea what he was doing. The cameras were crooked, one pointed at the sky, and another aimed at a bush. Still, Karen marched around like a general overseeing battle positions. She even handed out security watch captain badges to 2 residents who looked way too excited about the promotion. One of them was Frank, a retired dentist who once threatened to call the city over a trampoline. He took the job seriously, standing on his porch with binoculars and a police scanner app playing on loop. Things took a darker turn when Karen emailed a community-wide bulletin accusing my company of unauthorized transport of unverified contents, stating that these trucks may be endangering neighborhood children and pets. I couldn't believe it. She was framing it like I was smuggling nuclear waste instead of delivering water purification kits. The bulletin ended with a line that made my jaw drop. In the interest of safety, all residents are encouraged to record any suspicious deliveries and immediately report them to the HOA emergency line. They set up an emergency line. I had to read it twice to believe it. Then came the next major misstep. On Friday morning, one of my drivers, Alicia, called me from the neighborhood's east entrance. She'd taken the alternate route only to find Frank and a few other security volunteers standing near the cul-de-sac entrance with orange vests and cones. "They're doing a vehicle checkpoint," she said, confused. "Are they allowed to do that?" My heart sank. "Absolutely not," I said. "Take pictures. Do not engage. I'll handle it." I arrived 20 minutes later to find Frank waving down Alicia like he was directing traffic at a rock concert. "Sir, we're going to need you to open the back of the truck," he said, clipboard in hand. Alicia didn't say a word. She just held up her phone, camera rolling. Frank seemed unfazed. "We're authorized under Emergency HOA Resolution 19.2c trucks over a certain weight class must submit to visual inspection." I stepped in and said, "Unless your name ends in Gov, that's not happening." Frank blinked. "We're trying to protect the neighborhood." I smiled politely. "By inspecting sealed military shipments. You know that's a felony, right?" That got his attention. I didn't even need to escalate. Alicia had already sent the footage to my military liaison. Less than an hour later, Sergeant Patel herself rolled up in a military sub. She stepped out, crisp uniform and all, and walked directly to Frank, who had by then removed his vest and was pretending to be a jogger. "Sir," she said calmly, "we have confirmed unauthorized civilian attempts to breach logistical routes. This is now part of a formal investigation." Frank's face went ghost white. Karen arrived seconds later, heels clicking on the pavement, yelling, "This is an overreach. You can't just storm into our community without a warrant." Patel didn't even flinch. "Man, this isn't a storm. This is a light drizzle, and we don't need a warrant to enforce federal transport compliance. Your people are interfering with a protected supply chain." Karen tried to talk over her, but Patel lifted a hand and calmly stated, "Any further interference and we'll file for a federal injunction. That includes false reporting, unauthorized blockades, and unlicensed checkpoints. This is your only warning." Then she handed Karen a thick folder with the title Legal Notification of Obstruction Violation and Compliance Requirements. Karen snatched it like it had personally insulted her. The HOA crowd started to disperse, whispering among themselves. Later that afternoon, the community message board exploded. Residents who had been neutral were now furious. A few even apologized to my drivers. One woman named Cynthia wrote, "I thought those trucks were scary at first, but now I realize they're helping. What's scary is that I nearly believed Karen's newsletter." Another posted a meme with Derek's face photoshopped onto a traffic cone, captioned "Defense Level, Wet Floor Sign." By nightfall, Karen had gone quiet, but not before one final desperate move. She sent a last-minute notice declaring a temporary ban on non-residential industrial traffic pending HOA review. She tried to seal it with a digital signature, but it was full of typos and wasn't even in the correct file format. I printed it out, framed it, and hung it on the warehouse wall next to the now viral screenshot of Derek being escorted away from the gate. It was only the second day of pushback, and already the HOA was unraveling. But the funny thing about logistics, it doesn't stop, and neither do we. I had a full manifest for the coming week, and the next time my trucks rolled through, they wouldn't just be carrying supplies. They'd be carrying a message. One Karen and her clipboard army wouldn't be ready for. The silence from Karen lasted exactly 2 days. 2 whole days where there were no surprise checkpoints, no emails with red-letter warnings, no HOA goons trying to act like they were customs agents at a border crossing. It almost felt like peace had returned. Almost. But it was the calm before the storm because what Karen lacked in legal sense, she made up for in pure chaotic determination. On Monday morning, I received a notice in the mail from the HOA. It was printed on pink paper and smelled like cheap perfume, which meant it was absolutely authored by Karen. The header read, "Formal complaint against repeated violations of community order and safety." I rolled my eyes before I even got to the second line. According to Karen, my deliveries were not only disruptive, but now suspected of housing unapproved technologies and hazardous equipment. She cited numerous resident complaints, including a claim that one of my trucks emitted a low-frequency hum that scared a neighbor's cat into hiding for 3 days. I laughed out loud. A hum? We were delivering power storage batteries, not alien artifacts. But she wasn't done. She attached a blurry photo of my driver Alicia yawning in the cab of her truck with the caption, "Potential fatigue risk to children." I nearly spit my coffee. I could have ignored it, but my lawyer insisted I respond officially. Not only were we now documenting everything for the potential civil case, but the military was watching too. I drafted a response politely explaining again the legal status of our deliveries, the federal documentation supporting our access, and a friendly reminder that impersonating regulatory authority carried real consequences. I called the local police department this time, just for good measure. That same afternoon, I received an unexpected visit. 2 men in pressed suits showed up at my warehouse. One introduced himself as Agent Reynolds from the Office of Defense Logistics Oversight. His partner, Agent Cho, nodded silently, flipping through a folder. "We've been reviewing the situation with your HOA," Reynolds began, "and let's just say it sparked some attention upstairs." I led them to the back office, where we sat down, and they laid it all out. Apparently, Karen had made not just local noise but sent actual letters to congressional offices claiming our deliveries were part of a covert operation meant to militarize civilian neighborhoods. She had even referenced a non-existent Operation Backdoor Bayonet, which sounded like something a teenager would make up in Call of Duty. Agent Cho opened his folder and revealed a printed copy of one of Karen's emails. "She sent this to a senator's office," he said, tapping the page. "Claimed you were building a secret military base inside your garage." I couldn't even form words. "That's my gym," I finally muttered. "There's a rowing machine and a broken fan in there." The agents weren't here to investigate me. They knew exactly what I did, and all my contracts were verified. No, they were here to make sure this circus didn't derail anything critical. "We're not concerned about you," Reynolds assured me. But when someone throws around words like covert ops and neighborhood destabilization, it triggers a protocol. "We're fast-tracking a legal containment notice for that HOA. If they interfere again, it'll go federal." He handed me a letter to present if another issue occurred. It was titled Notice of Protected Federal Operations Priority Designation. Translation: the HOA was officially on a short leash, and I held the leash now. Unfortunately, Karen didn't take the leash well. That evening, she called an emergency board meeting in the clubhouse. She went full scorched earth. According to an attendee who secretly recorded the whole thing, she stood up in front of the dozen remaining HOA members and said, "I don't care who he delivers for. This is our neighborhood, and he doesn't make the rules." "We do." There was a scattered cheer, mostly from her 3 closest allies. Derek, who had somehow not been officially fired yet, Frank, the self-appointed watch captain, and one guy named Victor who just wanted to be part of something. But the rest of the room, dead silent. The audio captured one woman whispering, "She's going to get us sued into dust." Karen then unveiled her grand plan. "We're going to file for community rezoning. If we change the zoning designation, his trucks won't qualify to enter at all." That's when I knew she had fully lost it. Rezoning was a municipal process that required city approval, state verification, and months of bureaucratic slog. She thought she could just file some paperwork and block federal transport, but she wasn't done. She proposed a motion to install automated tire spike barriers at the main gate to control oversized entry. She literally wanted to deploy anti-vehicle measures against a logistics provider under federal contract. Someone in the room asked if that was even legal. Karen waved her hand like she was swatting a fly. "If we frame it as neighborhood safety infrastructure, we can call it defensive landscaping." The next morning, someone slipped a LUSP into our Dropbox. It had a label, HOA Night Meeting for your lawyers. It was the full audio of the board meeting. Every wild idea, every threat, every legal misstep. It was all there. I didn't have to do anything. I just sent it to my attorney, who forwarded it to the proper military liaison. 2 days later, the National Guard filed a formal complaint with the city, requesting immediate review of the HOA's actions for potential interference with emergency response operations. That alone triggered a municipal investigation. Then the final straw hit. Derek, apparently feeling invincible again, tried to block another delivery truck with nothing but a stop sign on a stick. The driver this time was someone new, Corporal John, a uniformed reservist on duty. Derek demanded to inspect the truck. John warned him twice. Derek reached for the door handle. John got out, called in the incident, and within 20 minutes, local police arrived. Derek was arrested for impersonating a regulatory official and obstructing protected transport. The footage went viral again, this time with the title, HOA Derek tries to arrest a soldier, gets dragged instead. I watched the clip in my office with a slice of leftover pizza and a very satisfied grin. Karen was running out of allies. The board was fracturing, and the residents were waking up. My inbox was filled with apology notes, not from the board, but from neighbors who were tired of being caught in the middle. One man offered to volunteer loading water crates as a peace gesture. Another said he'd been a veteran and hated what the HOA was doing to the community. People were realizing that the enemy wasn't a couple of trucks. It was the wannabe dictators with clipboards and too much free time. And me, I wasn't planning on stopping. I had one more delivery coming next week, and this time it wouldn't be just any shipment. It would be escorted by uniformed guards, with an aerial drone overhead, and a message attached to the cargo door that simply said, "You can't stop the supply line." Karen had picked a fight with the wrong guy, and now her own walls were beginning to crack. By the time the next scheduled delivery day arrived, the neighborhood felt like a sitcom that had jumped the shark. People were setting up lawn chairs near the front gate like it was the 4th of July. Kids had drawn chalk outlines of tanks and helicopters on the pavement. Someone even wheeled out a popcorn machine. This wasn't just a delivery anymore. It was a spectacle. The story had exploded beyond Reddit now. A few local reporters had set up cameras near the sidewalk, hoping to catch the next chapter of the HOA versus National Guard soap opera. I wasn't exactly thrilled about the attention, but I wasn't going to let the moment go to waste either. We were about to deliver a shipment of mobile solar generators and tactical-grade rations for a nearby base drill. Nothing illegal, nothing classified, just more of the same essential work we'd been doing quietly for years until Karen made it everyone's business. We didn't come in quietly this time. The convoy consisted of 2 standard delivery trucks, followed by a black sub carrying National Guard representatives, and trailing them was something new, a pair of olive drab Humvees from the local guard post, not combat-ready or armed, just official vehicles acting as escorts. And up above, for just a few minutes, a small drone buzzed gently through the sky, part of the base's training program, but also streaming footage back to command. The convoy rolled toward the gate, which had been suspiciously unlocked this time. No Derek in sight. No cones, no spike strips. Just wide-eyed residents holding their phones like they were filming a UFO landing. I stepped out of my truck as we paused near the entrance. I was wearing my company uniform, shirt tucked neatly into jeans, clipboard in hand. But walking beside me was Sergeant Patel in full National Guard regalia, boots clicking against the pavement like punctuation marks. She scanned the area with the sharp eyes of someone trained to spot danger before it shows up. Then she saw the handmade sign someone taped to a mailbox. "Welcome, Supply Hero." She gave a small smile. "Looks like your public relations are working out." Karen, of course, wasn't out front, but that didn't mean she wasn't watching. In fact, I was almost certain she was holed up inside her home, clutching binoculars and a legal pad covered in passive-aggressive bullet points. Paddle gestured toward the gate. "We good to roll in?" I nodded. The trucks pulled forward slowly as neighbors waved. A little kid even saluted the drivers as they passed. We parked in front of the designated unloading zone near my warehouse, which was technically within the neighborhood's jurisdiction, but privately owned and legally off-limits to HOA enforcement. I had triple-checked that detail after the first incident. As we began unloading, Frank, the ex-dentist turned security buff, shuffled over with a sheepish look. He was holding a tray of bottled water and granola bars. "Peace offering," he muttered, avoiding eye contact. "Didn't know it was all, legal." I accepted it with a nod, and to his credit, he didn't try to justify what he'd done, just quietly left the tray and walked away. A few other residents followed suit, offering small apologies and neighborly smiles. The tone of the community had shifted. They weren't just curious anymore. They were fed up with the drama, the lies, and the way Karen had made them look like fools on a national stage. But the real surprise came an hour later, when a black sedan pulled up near my lot. Out stepped a city official from zoning enforcement, clipboard in hand, accompanied by two more individuals in suits. They requested a brief conversation. I agreed, pulling them into my office. They sat down and presented documents showing that Karen had, in fact, filed for community rezoning to restrict commercial traffic, just like she promised in her little meeting. The kicker? She filed it under emergency environmental protection, claiming that my trucks were leaking hazardous fluids and damaging community soil integrity. Of course, the city did a follow-up. The environmental team tested runoff near my property, checked my vehicle maintenance logs, and even examined old footage. Nothing. Clean as a whistle. The official smiled slightly as he handed me the final ruling. No violations. All zoning remains unchanged. Application rejected. I thanked him and asked whether Karen would be fined for filing a false claim. He raised an eyebrow. "That's under review." Before he left, he paused at the door. "Between us," he said, "my nephew's in the Guard. He heard about all this and sent me the Reddit link. Told me to look out for the HOA clown show. It didn't disappoint." While I was still digesting that moment of poetic justice, my phone buzzed with a message from the local news anchor who had been covering the situation. She wanted to schedule an interview, not about the trucks, but about how neighborhoods across the country were using HOA power to push around legitimate businesses. It was becoming a bigger issue, and apparently, my case was now Exhibit A. I politely declined again. I wasn't looking to become a mascot for anti-HOA activism. I just wanted to deliver supplies without being tackled by a clipboard. But the icing on the cake came later that evening when the National Guard held a small appreciation event for civilian contractors. I was invited, along with a handful of others. It wasn't flashy, just a casual dinner at the local armory. But during the event, they presented me with a plaque that read, "For maintaining operational readiness under civilian interference." The whole room laughed at that, and Paddle leaned over to whisper. They wanted to call it the Karen Defense Medal, but legal shot it down. I couldn't stop grinning. I wasn't in this for the recognition, but after everything the HOA dragged us through, it felt good to be publicly vindicated. Back in the neighborhood, change was brewing. Residents started demanding answers. They wanted to know why Karen had put them on the map for all the wrong reasons. They questioned the money spent on cameras, checkpoints, and spike strip proposals. And they definitely didn't like being labeled anti-military in the comments section of every article written about us. A petition to hold an emergency election began circulating. Names were being gathered, and the name at the very top of the remove immediately list? Karen. As I looked out across the neighborhood from my warehouse steps that evening, watching the sun dip low and neighbors chatting where they used to glare, I realized something. Karen had tried to make this about control, but what she really did was remind everyone what overreach looked like and how ridiculous it becomes when left unchecked. And while she still had her position, her voice, her pen full of ink and threats, the court of public opinion had already handed down its sentence. And the next chapter. Oh, it was coming, because I wasn't done yet. Not with Karen, not with the HOA, and definitely not with that final shipment I had planned, the one that would shut down her reign for good. The morning of the final delivery felt different. The air was clearer, the tension gone, and there was a quiet anticipation humming beneath the surface of the neighborhood. Something had shifted since the last convoy. The lawn chairs were back, but this time they were set up in solidarity, not for spectacle. There were no protest signs, no angry glares, and not a single reflective vest in sight. The only thing that remained of the old resistance was the faint memory of a pink HOA notice flapping on a lamppost, faded and forgotten. but I knew better than to assume it was over. Not until Karen was gone. She hadn't made a public move since her rezoning stunt failed, but the silence wasn't surrender. It was a pause, the kind of calm that came before the wild flailing of a drowning tyrant. I stood at the loading dock of my warehouse, watching the final crate get secured. This was no ordinary shipment. It was part of a larger contract to provide backup power and cold storage units for a regional National Guard training camp. And it was the largest load we'd sent out from this location. 4 trucks, 2 escorts, 1 drone overhead, fully authorized, fully documented, and more than enough to draw Karen out if she had anything left in her bag of tricks. And sure enough, just as we rolled toward the gate, her front door swung open. There she was, clipboard in hand, phone held high like she was trying to film a citizen's arrest from across her hydrangeas. Her mouth moved furiously, no doubt narrating her latest attempt at spinning reality into fiction. She stayed on her porch, though, too burned from the last rounds to get any closer. I didn't even glance her way as the trucks rolled through. I let the drone capture the footage that had become the new insurance policy. Let the cameras record what my words no longer needed to explain. And then, just as the final truck cleared the gate, I unveiled the surprise. The rear of the last vehicle had been painted with a custom banner. In bold block letters, supporting your guard since before your clipboard. Below it was a cartoon of a delivery truck rolling over a stack of HOA violation slips. The laughter from the neighbors was immediate and loud. Several phones went up, and within minutes, the photo was posted online. It caught fire again. Back at the warehouse, the crew began unloading for the final time. My drivers were grinning, full of energy, energized by the sense that this was more than a job now. It was a statement, a reclaiming of space. Karen, meanwhile, was clearly unraveling. She paced the sidewalk for over an hour, making calls, gesturing wildly, ignoring everyone who passed. Her last play came that afternoon when an unmarked envelope arrived at my office. Inside was a letter. No logo, no signature, just plain typed words accusing me of inciting hostility, disrupting the moral order of the neighborhood, and weaponizing deliveries for social clout. She called me a glorified TikTok trucker. I laughed so hard I nearly dropped my coffee. I scanned the document, then handed it to my lawyer, who immediately recognized it as an attempt at defamation without any legal standing. He said, "It's not even worth shredding." But I disagreed. I took the letter, framed it, and added it to the growing wall of ridiculous HOA mementos in my office. Then I went a step further. I uploaded a photo of it to Reddit with the caption, "Karen's final act of desperation, calls me a weaponized delivery influencer." Should I put it on a t-shirt? The comments were pure gold. Print it. Wear it. Deliver justice. That evening, the HOA held its emergency election. For the first time, residents showed up in record numbers. Over 80% of the community cast their vote. The room was filled with whispered conversations, quiet tension, and the nervous energy of people finally fed up with being ruled by threats and ego. Karen sat stiffly at the head table, flanked by her shrinking band of loyalists. She looked confident, but her eyes kept darting to the hallway where people continued to enter. The writing was on the wall. This was her last stand. When the votes were tallied, it wasn't even close. Karen lost her seat by a landslide. In fact, all 3 of her allies were voted out as well. The new board was made up of people who had once been too intimidated to speak up, but now stood tall, emboldened by the chaos she caused. The newly elected president, a retired school principal named Eleanor, walked up to the mic and calmly addressed the crowd. Our community deserves peace, not paranoia. Let's move forward with kindness and common sense. The room erupted in applause. Karen didn't take it well. She stormed out without saying a word, her clipboard tucked under her arm like a defeated sword. Someone opened the door for her. She refused to look anyone in the eye as she passed. Her car screeched a little too fast as it pulled out of the parking lot. And just like that, the Karen era ended. The following week, I received a small package from the National Guard. Inside was a sleek, dark plaque etched with silver letters, in recognition of your resilience, professionalism, and composure under unnecessary civilian interference. Your service helped uphold operational continuity. I hung it in the warehouse beside the framed HOA letter, a perfect symbol of absurdity and triumph standing side by side. I looked around at my team, drivers, clerks, techs, all smiling and laughing as they loaded up the next set of routes. The tension was gone, replaced with a sense of pride. We weren't just surviving. We were thriving. But the most unexpected moment came from the last person I thought I'd hear from, Frank. He showed up at the loading dock one afternoon with a six-pack of root beer and an envelope. "Don't laugh," he said, handing me the envelope. Inside was a hand-drawn map of the neighborhood with a note. "Alternate entry routes, just in case you ever need to sneak in again." I smiled. "Thanks, Frank." He nodded. "I was wrong. A lot of us were, but we're going to fix it." He walked off without another word, and I realized even the most entitled neighborhoods can change if someone stands firm enough to force that change. The deliveries kept coming. The work continued, and the chaos that once defined the neighborhood slowly faded into memory. But every now and then, someone would walk past the trucks, point at the plaque or the cartoon banner still hanging on the warehouse wall, and say, "You're the guy who took down the HOA queen, right?" I'd grin and nod. "Nah," I'd say, "I just drive the truck." The clipboard did all the damage itself. And with that,